Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We're fixing to start episode 3, and I hope you're enjoying these episodes. And if you are, and you feel comfortable, I would love it if you would share this series of videos. There may be other creatives and crafters in your circle of friends and groups that might enjoy this same type of story time while they're crafting. So please, if you feel comfortable, please share these for me. And don't forget to leave your comments. I love your comments. And I try to answer each and every one. So don't be shy, okay? All right, episode 3. Victoria paused at the receptionist's desk and picked up her mail from Miss Temple. Her eyes scanned the large lobby. Could she get more ridiculous? Why did she keep doing this? The fiasco with Mr. DeVar took place over a week ago. Apparently, not long enough for her to shake the absurd notion he might be lurking in some doorway, waiting to turn her into mush again. She needed a chai latte in the worst way, something to calm her nerves. Miss Temple, would you please have a chai sent up from the coffee shop? Sure thing, Miss Ballard. Before you get started for the day, you probably need to check the lead article in the latest copy of A New York Woman. I'm sure you're going to get some questions concerning the story, and I know you want to be prepared. Okay, I'll look it over. Victoria headed for her office. Easing into her chair, she slipped off her shoes. A stack of correspondence needing her signature sat in the middle of the desk. Placing the incoming mail aside, she perused and then signed the necessary letters, just finishing as Miss Temple knocked and entered. Here's your chai latte, extra hot the way you prefer. Thank you. I've signed these letters. You can take them back with you. Also, please hold my calls for an hour. I have the Addison contract to iron out, and I don't want any distractions. Victoria heard the door click shut behind her receptionist. Picking up her drink, she blew on it twice and took her first careful sip. Perfect. The beverage was steamy, sweet, and energizing. She took a larger swallow and reached for this month's copy of the New York Woman. Chai tea spewed over her desk as she gasped for air. After a coughing spasm, the choking reflex released its grip on her throat. She stared at the culprit responsible for her near strangulation. A grainy photo of her likeness covered the front page of the prestigious magazine. The photo was unflattering, chosen, she was sure, to enhance the caption below. Amazonia to marry. Cringing in disbelief, she loosened her fingers from the creased edge of the magazine and flipped through the glossy pages, finding the article she wanted on page 16. It read, "Could this really be true? Victoria Ballard, known as Amazonia by her constituents, has yielded her shield and spear. If so, we wonder if the courage and identity of the brave man who would risk such an alliance. While this rumor cannot be confirmed, I'm sure we all await the outcome with eager expectation. Miss Ballard will shortly be co-hosting the annual Children's Charity Ball at Leighton Hall. Perhaps the mystery man will appear then." Victoria swiveled her chair to the left in search of her trash basket. Giving the magazine a toss, it hit its mark and dropped to the bottom of the receptacle with a satisfying pluck. Nothing was more irritating than having gross distortions about her private life put into print. Unfortunately, there was not a lot she could do about them. Being one of the youngest female vice presidents in her field created its own drawbacks, and being press-worthy was one of them. When she turned up at the ball unescorted, maybe the press would finally get the message. No story about her marriage would ever be forthcoming. Having one man dictating her opinions was not in her life plan. She didn't have a need for a husband. She didn't want a husband. End of discussion, she muttered. The chilly night air seeped through Rashid's robe. His body, heated by a 2-hour ride on horseback, welcomed the drop in temperature. Pulling in a deep breath, he let the earthy smell of cooling sand fill his nostrils. He loved the desert at night. A world of heat and light during the day, it transformed into a realm of romanticism after dark, becoming a place where a man could spin his strongest desires into momentary reality. At night, the molten colors of day gave way to cool, raw hues. The nocturnal tones lurked in the darkness and morphed the land they touched, much as the rocky hills turned blue and purple by the moonlight, framed the dim landscape in secrecy. He wanted to stay and merge in silence with this world as only a solitary man could, but he was not alone. 60 mounted riders flanked him. They waited in vigilant stillness, their weathered faces mirroring the rippled patterns of the wind-blown sand beneath them. The labored breathing of horses and the creaking of leather as riders shifted in their saddles were the only sounds intruding on the night's breezes. He and his small group had followed an old enemy to the edge of a Holloman's eastern border. He needed to make a decision about Alkmund and his band of radicals. Sheikh Kahanjar and his men were tired of waiting, and rightly so. Theirs were the encampments harassed and herds stolen. At times such as these, his failure to master the blending of his two selves surfaced. The prince of the people and the man of the people, prioritized on two different levels. As a prince, he was well educated and traveled, comfortable among the world's elite. In this modern world, a prince was required to be patient, diplomatic. He could not cross borders to annihilate his enemies as his grandfather would have done. Now there were treaties to honor, international law to consider, none of which satisfied the man in whose blood ran the primeval nature of the desert. Its unrelenting mastery over its own territory took decisive, sometimes unforgiving action. The same insistent forces simmered under his skin and clashed with the civilized dictates of rulership. Sometimes he craved the freedom of ordinary men, men whose actions affected a small realm, not a nation's honor. Alchemist was growing more troublesome each day. He kept his militant camp a few miles outside Ahalaman's border. Moving often, he made tracking his location difficult. His band was growing, and from the sophistication of the weapons they carried, Rashid was certain they were being supplied with arms from someone with international contacts. Too many small militant groups were being absorbed into larger terrorist elements in this area of the world. He needed to eliminate such a possibility this close to his own border. My lord, Khalifar spoke in an undertone as he leaned toward Rashid. The men are restless. Should we advance? Rashid considered Khalifar's words. He was right. The edgy tension of the men around him was unmistakable. Send out 2 riders. Have them locate and observe Al-Qamud's camp. They can make their report when the sun rises. Until then, we wait. Rashid stared after the 2 riders Khalifar chose, their silhouettes growing smaller as they rode toward the east. He waited until the darkened vista enveloped them into its obscuring arms. Then he moved his mount a few yards away from the other riders. He knew Khalifar moved forward with him. Turning in the saddle, Rashid glanced at the riders behind him. They waited for his decision. Resigned, he spoke to Khalifar. We wait. Instruct the others to return to the oasis. I will follow before long. Do you think to remain here alone is wise? Perhaps I should stay behind as well. Rashid smiled in acceptance of the man who would forever be vigilant, if not suffocating, in his protection. I am in no danger here. Take the men back. Ease their impatience. I will follow soon. He listened while the muffled sound of mounted riders faded into the night. In solitude at last, he gave his attention to the contentious mood plaguing his mind and burning his gut. The men of Balthazar deserved his complete attention. They were loyal and his constant watchmen on his eastern border. They honored him with their allegiance because they respected his strength. He shook his head and sneered. A leader who could think of nothing but a woman would not keep their respect for long. Time was moving too slow. He needed to resolve this complication in his life. Once Victoria was safely inside his boundaries, she would not dominate his every thought. Until then, he needed to find a way to temper his own impatience. An image of her played through his mind. Mounted beside him, her pale hair uncovered and ruffled by the night's gentle wind, a vision of pastel beauty. What would she think of this land? Would she appreciate its antiquity and diversity? Could she allow herself to experience its wonder and passion? He was sure at first she would resist the change and adjustments needed. He would temper his impatience and give her time. Then he would teach her to love the land as he did. He would teach her to love many things. His stallion pulled against the reins, as if the passion rising in his master also coursed through his blood. Leaning forward, Rashid stroked Ali's strong, muscular neck. The flesh under his hand twitched with energy, waiting to be unleashed. Leaning back in the saddle, he gave Ali his signal to move. The stallion lunged forward. Horse and rider raced the wind across the hills of shifting sand, their spirits merging, their hearts pounding like the hooves striking the cooling earth. Rashid sipped a cup of hot, sweet mint tea just as the sun touched the morning sky with magenta strokes. In front of him stood one of the scouts sent out the night before. "What have you learned, Nadir?" "My lord, Ahmed's position is 1 hour's ride from the border. 3 guards stood near the tents. We saw none on the outer edges of the encampment. The men rested unconcerned around their fires, with many women and children accompanying them." "How many men?" asked Rashid. 50. About 50. "You did well. Go now and refresh yourself. We break camp soon." Rashid walked to the side table, poured himself another cup of tea, and picked up a date cake. He turned and offered some to Khalifar, who took 3. "Ahmed is cunning and wise," said Khalifar. "Yes, he knows we will not attack women and children. He will view our patience as weakness, but his own arrogance will surrender him to us. Tell the others to await my return. We will then decide a plan to eliminate the threat Ahmed and his men pose." "Sheikh Kahanjar will not be happy with this delay." Rashid nodded. "A circumstance which cannot be helped. For now, we must wait. However, there is another matter I would discuss with you before you go." Rashid gestured for Khalifar to help himself to another cup of tea and was amused when his friend picked up 2 more date cakes. He was reminded of his grandfather's words, "Every man has a weakness for what is sweet, whether a date cake or a woman." Khalifar's was definitely date cakes. His, he was about to reveal. "In 2 weeks' time, I will take a bride." Khalifar's lips parted in shock. He stared at Rashid as if he were suddenly deranged, like someone touched by too much desert sun. "My lord." Tilting his head in a questioning gesture, he added with a hopeful tone, "Surely you jest." "I see no jest in the statement," Rashid scowled. "As you know, my intention in going to New York was to obtain the ancestral lands to the west, a task I have now accomplished. The terms of the agreement included an American woman." Khalifar choked on his last bite of date cake. After drowning a half cup of tea, he asked, "You bought a foreign woman? Since when do you, Prince of a Holloman need to barter for a woman. I did not barter. She is Jacob Ballard's daughter. The terms were of her father's choosing. And she agrees to this arrangement? To my knowledge, Jacob had not yet informed his daughter of his decision. When he chooses to inform her, it is of no consequence to our arrangement. He made the request for a marriage alliance. I agreed. It is done. And you? This woman is really acceptable to you? Yes. I will take his daughter, Victoria, as my wife. Rashid watched as Khalifar left his seat and walked to the table laid with tea and cakes. He kept silent while Khalifar appeared to examine the tea urn. Then, without capturing more of the sweet cakes, his friend returned to his seat. What if she is not of a mind to take you? I understand Western women control their own destiny, even married ones. Rashid's own doubts kicked his heart against his chest, and his nostrils flared. She will learn our time and our ways in time. This is unexpected, Rashid. You have always measured your decisions with prudence and forethought. Do you think a foreign wife, especially an American, is in your best interest or a Holloman's? This could be a great disturbance. Rashid drew his brows together in annoyance at Khalifar's deductions and snapped a question of his own. Do you think I am not equal to the task? Khalifar rose and approached him. Rashid rose as well. They studied one another, each taking the other's measure. Rashid thought about how many times in years past he had stood in a similar way, a headstrong boy struggling to fill the role to which he had been born. Khalifar, 10 years his senior, being ever diligent in filling the void of father, counselor, and friend. Khalifar's voice was calm, but Rashid detected a hint of censure along its edges. Well, I understand better what has been preoccupying you of late. And just what do you think you understand? I have seen you enjoy the company of many females, but never have I seen one who could undermine your responsibility. You have been reluctant to carry out your obligation to the men in this camp because your focus is divided. When one woman has this much influence, disruption is sure to follow. How do you expect your people to deal with this foreign woman if you cannot do so with proper control? Rashid clenched his fists. He could taste the anger on his tongue, sharp and acidy. Because of their friendship, he often accorded Khalifar liberties he would not permit another man. But he was no longer a boy, and Khalifar needed to accept that fact. As your prince, I have no need to explain my decisions. As your friend, I will overlook your lack of restraint. The significant point is this: I have acquired the lands important to my people and a wife to give me sons. Have you not given me constant reminders of my duty in that area since my 30th year? I don't remember suggesting an American. How long have you known this woman? Long enough. Are you in lust or love? The first is easily managed. The second could have far-reaching consequences. Rashid cast a warning glance at Khalifar. You go too far, my friend. My actions have never been subject to anyone's will but my own. All I require of you and my people is loyalty and patience. Victoria will need time to make a few adjustments before settling into her new life. As will you, Khalifar said. Let us hope that in this you can be equally decisive. Now take my leave, my lord, unless there is more you wish to discuss. There is nothing more. Having his judgment questioned was bad enough, but Khalifar's disapproval scalded his pride. He had expected Victoria would cause him some problems, just not so quickly. No matter. They would soon be married. He could then return his full attention to Ahalaman's interests, settling any question Khalifar or anyone else had about his attention to duty and obligation. Rashid sank onto the cedar bench beside his sleeping cot. Resting his elbows on his knees, he dropped his head into his hands and worked his thumbs in a circular motion across his temples. This gnawing insecurity had not plagued him since he had assumed leadership of Ahalaman at the age of 15. In the 18 years since then, he had realized his ambition to be a prince his nation could respect and trust. Had he done the right thing for his country? Would a foreign wife disturb the tranquility his people now enjoyed? Judging by his state of mind, the answer was not good. The drone of an approaching helicopter signaled his time for reflection and doubt were at an end. As a man, he had given his word to the woman's father. As a prince, he had made a choice for himself and his people. Whatever resulted from his decision would have to be lived with. But a twinge of anticipation tunneled its way around his anger. In truth, what worried his mind and troubled his conscience set his heart ablaze. Isn't it amazing how the tone of a story switches back and forth as we look inside the minds and hearts of the characters themselves, as we get their perspective, their motivations, their feelings, their desires. What's very important about characterization is to figure out what each character wants most and what they're willing to sacrifice to get it. This builds a deep story, not just a shallow romance, but a struggle. Just like life is a struggle. We fight for our happiness each and every day. And characters in a good story will do the same. Till the next segment, remember, to stay romanticized. Bye-bye.